Hello, I'm Infamous Fear, and this is Period Drama. It's time to welcome you to the world of literature's greatest detective. Sherlock Holmes has only been adapted to the big and small screen about a bazillion times, and is the most portrayed movie character ever. He and Watson are also the most long-running homoerotic pairing ever. Stop that! You're getting confused! This isn't an episode of Infamous Queer, this is Period Drama! Oh my god, it's the gender hipster. I'm sorry, I had no idea what came over me just then. It's just that so many of the period dramas I review are homoerotic. You think everything's homoerotic? Do you have a picture of men making out over one of your eyes and a picture of women feeling each other up over the other? God damn it, go away! Let me review Sherlock Holmes! Good luck! You've got 211 films to get through. I'll be seeing you in 6 months. Okay, don't worry everyone, gender hipster's gone now. Sherlock Holmes isn't even a period drama! We'll just ignore that. Most people wouldn't think of Sherlock Holmes when they hear the phrase period drama, but in my book, it counts. Sure, it's not women walking around in bonnets talking about when they're going to be married, but it's historical and dramatic and involves costumes and crumpety moustache guys trotting around old London sending each other telegrams. That's a period drama! Because I've got an excess of time on my hands, I've read all of Arthur Conan Doyle's original stories. Therefore, I have my own idea about how the characters come across and how they should be presented. The original stories are great, by the way, and most of them are quite short. Be sure to give them a read. I've also watched a few adaptations, and it's time for me to briskly whisk over each one. They are Russian Sherlock Holmes. Yes, there was a Russian one. Granada Sherlock Holmes. And Guy Ritchie Sherlock Holmes. I'm not going to be looking at Stephen Moffat's Sherlock, because entertaining as it is, it's not a period drama. It's an interesting idea to change a setting to the present, but a lot of the tropes and cases don't actually work when you change the time frame. A good deal of Holmes's investigations could be solved by credit card records, mobile phones and the internet. And when it comes to updating the setting, I'm a purist. I also like waistcoats.
That was my waistcoat.
Everyone, get in touch with your inner misogynistic, Victorian, drug-addicted, ambiguously gay recluse, because it's time to look at Sherlock Holmes. Holmes, the character. Physically, Holmes is supposed to be tall and thin, grey-eyed and gaunt, a drug addict, and not wearing a deerstalker. In Russian Holmes, he's kind of short, but otherwise he passes muster perfectly well. He's good, but Vasily Livanov himself doesn't leave a grand impression on me.
Можно подумать, что у вас на затылке глаза.
Дорогой друг, если бы вы читали мою монографию об органах осязания у сыщиков, вы бы знали, что на кончиках ушей имеются такие тепловые точки. Так что глаз на затылке у меня нет.
Он видит ваше отражение в кофейнике.
He's not the main thing I remember about the series, but we'll get to that later. Granada's Holmes is played by Jeremy Brett, and he is amazing!
Put down your goose.
He presents Holmes as a very rigidly upright man bursting with repressed homosexuality, which comes out in a strange, sensuous manner towards his male co-stars, and his quaint and crisp pursed lips.
Well, all's well that ends well. Your consulting room?
Jeremy Brett also has a sex voice.
Does that suggest nothing to you?
There's just no other way to describe it. His voice oozes with something seductive.
Come in. It is more than a precious stone. It is the precious stone. Are you satisfied?
Granada also amplified his fabulousness by reflecting rainbows off his face, for one. The best thing about Granada Holmes is after a while it starts to get to you, and you begin to hear your inner monologue in Jeremy Brett's voice.
I don't believe you.
And now, Robert Downey Jr.
You know, in another life, you'd have made an excellent criminal.
Yes, and you, sir, an excellent policeman.
He has a lot of fun with it, playing up Holmes's junky mannerisms and his dependence on Watson. I'm not sure whether this is the most homoerotic Holmes has ever been, but it's certainly the most deliberately homoerotic. He has wonderful chemistry with Jude Law, and they make a great pairing.
So you're free this evening?
Absolutely.
Dinner?
Wonderful.
The Royale?
My favorite.
Mary's coming.
Not available.
You're meeting her, Holmes? You look gorgeous.
And just like that, a million fics were written. Watson, the character. Watson's often had a poor rap, which is understandable because he's had to play second fiddle to an insufferable genius. Too often is he cast as a terrible bumbling old man, merely there as stupid comic relief. I have no idea where everyone got the idea that Watson was 1,000 years old, because he met Holmes when he was 22, and they're roughly the same age. Nigel Bruce? Well, he's probably the one to blame for stupid Watson.
Stupid thing.
The Russian series did better. Vitaly Solomon plays Watson as long-suffering, romantic and faithful.
Нам вас так не хватало. Ну что вы, Холмс, что вы? Давайте веселиться, Холмс.
There are two Watsons in the Granada adaptation, and both of them were pretty good. The first one, David Burke, had a slightly annoying reedy earnestness to him, like an overexcited guest speaker at a high school, but he wasn't extremely idiotic.
You have the photograph?
Then Edward Hardwicke came along and pushed David Burke into the Nigel Bruce pit where he was eaten alive by bowler hats. Edward Hardwicke, simply put, was much better as Watson, even if he was 1,000 years old.
No, there's more to this than meets the eye.
I do not agree. This case is unworthy of you. I must return to my surgery.
Interesting fact, Edward Hardwicke also played Sir Arthur Conan Doyle in another movie. I'll put in a brief mention for the Watson in Wishbone's A Scandal in Bohemia, because he too was 1,000 years old and really annoying. Poor bastard also had to play second fiddle to a dog. Jude Law? This is the role that made me like Jude Law. My only experience before this was him in Gattaca, where he had a terrible accent yo-yoing all over the place, and it made me hate him. This wasn't helped by my previous exposure being from seeing his smug, smirking face plastered all over the posters of that terrible Alfie remake. But as Watson, Jude Law is very, very good.
I've been reviewing my notes on our exploits over the last 7 months. Would you like to know my conclusion? I am psychologically disturbed. How so? Why else would I continually be led into situations where you deliberately withhold your plans from me?
He's so good at projecting his indignant air of cheesed off in response to Holmes being his annoying self. And he's probably one of the only men who look better with a moustache. Seriously, for the most part, when it comes to moustaches, just don't. Jude Law is also just better when he plays gay. He and Robert Downey Jr. know they're basically playing each other's boyfriends, and it works well. Irene Adler! Irene Adler is one of the only notable female characters in the Holmes series, and too often she's cast as Holmes's love interest, even though she's only there for about 2 stories out of 60. There are a few things you need to know about her. One is that she's apparently a master of disguise, meaning she can convincingly disguise herself as a man. She's also a contralto opera singer, and was heavily involved in blackmail. She's one of the only women Holmes respects, and he's a misogynistic jerk who would happily avoid all women if possible. Now on to the one thing about Irene Adler's portrayal that always rubs me up the wrong way. Her cross-dressing. I know people in the Victorian era would probably rely a lot more on people's dress and presentation to tell their gender than we would, but for the most part, Irene does not pass at all. She's terrible in the Granada version, and in the 2009 version I had no idea she was supposed to be in disguise as a man. She's even wearing makeup, which not many women of the time would have done when they were dressed as women. Russian Sherlock Holmes does it the best, which is strange because usually it's the most over the top. Well, that's it for the characters. Let's move our way on to the adaptations in general. Infamous Fear, you're not doing this properly. Why the hell haven't you mentioned Moriarty, the Napoleon of crime? My review, my rules. Alright, fine. Moriarty, very briefly, is the closest thing to being Holmes's nemesis. At least that's what you'd think. The thing is, while Moriarty is the intellectual equal of Holmes, and thus poses the only real threat in the series, even killing Holmes at one point, he's barely in the original stories. If I'm going to talk about Moriarty, then I'm going to have to talk about Mycroft, Holmes's brother, who was there even more in the original stories. Or Lestrade, or Mrs. freaking Hudson, and I'll be here all day! So yes, Moriarty's importance, like Irene's, is greatly overstated. However, he's a much more important character in the long run than Irene Adler, seeing as he actually killed Holmes at one point, so why haven't I discussed him? There's one simple reason why Moriarty almost got left out of the roundup. Irene Adler gets interpreted in tons of different ways, most of which annoy me, but Moriarty is always the same. He's described in a very specific way in the books, and in every single adaptation I've ever seen, he looks the same, acts the same, and he speaks in the same voice that sounds like he gargled with antifreeze.
It has been an intellectual treat to me to see the way in which you've grappled with this matter.
I have the utmost regard for your talents.
Ведь вы были здесь, Холмс, не так ли?
He basically just turns up, says some evil stuff, is all menacing and large-headed, and shoves Holmes over a waterfall. What the hell can I say about that? It's alarming that two of the versions I've looked at seem to have cloned the same actor. Yep, that's Moriarty. The only notable thing is that Russian Sherlock Holmes manages to add a touch of the ridiculous to his character, which we see in the thrilling final conflict between Holmes and Moriarty, where the Napoleon of crime appears to be molesting the great detective to death. Watch as he seems to be enjoying grappling dangerously close to Holmes's crotch, as if he's trying to cop a feel before they both fall to their doom. Once again, a class act from Russian Sherlock Holmes. Moriarty in 2011's Sherlock Holmes gets more character development and is there for more than 5 minutes, so I suppose I should talk about him. Jared Harris is great with his creepy, more English than the English voice, but he's Moriarty. I guess he's got more hair than the other Moriartys. Special notes. Russian Sherlock Holmes. Russian Sherlock Holmes is everything I'd want in a period drama. Ridiculous!
The
first version that I watched had terrible fan subs which only served to heighten the hilarity of the series. It's a very good, accurate adaptation of the stories which only changes things slightly and integrates changes seamlessly. However, as we saw from Jane Eyre, just because something is accurate, it doesn't stop the hilarity from creeping in. Holmes and Watson, among other things, have a homoerotic fistfight in their period-accurate underwear, while a burst of head-exploding fanfare comes left of field to stun the viewer into paroxysms of laughter.
Не желаете ли побоксировать?
Вы серьезно? А вы не пожалеете?
Я был чемпионом своего полка.
The music in this is amazingly over the top and is apt to come in strange bursts and inopportune times. Apparently the music in this was composed to sound English, but in my mind it sounds far more like over-the-top Soviet fanfare. Holmes and Watson are very homoerotic, which apparently is considered normal in Russia if you can go by their propaganda.
Как вы себя чувствуете?
Как последний дурак.
Не огорчайтесь, Ватсон.
Some of the supporting characters are amazing, such as Sir Henry Baskerville from The Hound of the Baskervilles, or as he's more well known, Sir Henry Baskerville.
Сэр Генри – последний из рода Баскервилей.
Здравствуйте, здравствуйте, мистер Холмс. Я вас узнал.
Putting the amazing hilarity aside, Russian Sherlock Holmes does a very good job. It has great settings, the actors are either legitimately good or entertainingly over the top, the costumes look pretty varied and well done, and the stories are adapted fairly accurately. There are moments of cheapness, such as multiple terrible death scenes, including an assassin coming to kill a man by climbing in his window and rolling around in bed as if having sex with him. And the Hound of the Baskervilles looking more like luminous Scooby-Doo. But this was Soviet Russia, so I'm prepared to let it pass. There are 5 movies and they're all great. Granada Holmes. Granada Holmes, where do I start? Hearing that little theme song sets a thrill going in my heart, especially when I see urchins flamboyantly begging like that. Jeremy Brett is a treat, and you need to watch a series if only to see him prancing his way through Victorian London being fabulous. He was very meticulous about getting Holmes' character exactly right, and he thought very hard about the man's motivations and backstory.
Mr. Holmes. Mr. Peterson, the commissionaire from opposite.
Oh, please,
He'd like a word
go
with you.
away.
The producers originally intended to adapt all of the Holmes stories, but Jeremy Brett unfortunately died before they could. He will be sorely missed.
We're not jealous of you, you know, at Scotland Yard. Oh, so we're proud of you. And if you come down tomorrow, there's not a man from the oldest inspector to the youngest constable who wouldn't be glad to shake you by the hand.
No one could stand and laugh maniacally at a mantelpiece like Jeremy Brett could.
The boot was worn by his brother, Sir Roland Musgrave, at Naseby.
It was it indeed.
And no one but Granada could make a face-washing scene seem so dramatic. Or produce such an amazing acid trip sequence. Most of the stories were adapted and they were very well done, aside from a few slip-ups towards the end, mainly to do with having to work around Brett's ill health.
Look up, Uncle! Stolen.
I can't fault the costume, the supporting cast or the sets, especially when compared to other 80s period dramas.
Tell Mama she has run out in the rain. Bad animal.
Holmes fans are very finicky and people have a lot of loyalty towards the series, so I suppose they had to be very careful not to screw it up. There's another reason to watch a Granada adaptation, and that's a chance to see cross-dressing Jude Law years before he was Watson. The 2009 movie. A lot of fans complained about Guy Ritchie's 2009 movie, saying the plot was ludicrous and too much like an action movie. To those of you who cried out, "Far-fetched, not Holmes!" then I have something to bring to your attention. Towards the end of his run, after Arthur Conan Doyle had tried unsuccessfully to kill Holmes off, he wrote a story called The Creeping Man, in which Holmes goes to investigate the case of a man's dog behaving strangely and aggressively towards him. He then finds out that the man has been injecting himself with monkey testicle extract and it's turning him into a monkey. Yes, folks, that's an actual original Sherlock Holmes story from the pen of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle himself. So, steampunk explosive devices and gingerhead dwarves? That's upright and pedestrian compared to the author's own work. Also, in regards to the homoeroticism, it's all there in the book. Novel Holmes bickers with Watson just as much and he's just as upset about Watson getting married. Not to mention that Novel Holmes decides that Watson will be an awesome roommate within about 10 minutes of meeting him. Did he just think he was hot or something? And Holmes serenades Watson with his violin. If that's not homoerotic, then... Infamous fear! I order you to cease! Do you have any idea how many times you've said the word homoerotic in this review? 8? You think everything's homoerotic. God damn it, can't you even review a period drama without it being about how gay the main characters are? As punishment, I'm forcing you to watch horrible cheesy romantic comedies with no homoerotic subtext for a month! No! Actually, wait. I don't have a whole month's worth of horrible cheesy romantic comedies. I'll think of something. Will the gender hipster find anything with no homoerotic subtext at all? Will Infamous Fear ever review anything that passes the Bechdel test? Will we ever find out the gender hipster's true gender? Oh my god, it can't be true. Find out in the next episode.